Have you ever had a really bad day? Like one of those days that's so bad that it actually almost becomes funny. I remember when I was a freshman in high school, my family decided to take this RV trip out west. We had it all planned out. We were gonna fly to Denver, pick up our RV there, and then travel around for 10 days out west and see as much as we possibly could. And so the day finally came, we flew into Denver, we picked up this awesome RV, and we were excited and we hit the road. And no joke, exactly 5 hours into the trip, we break down in the middle of the literal desert. Like looking around, dried, cracked ground, no civilization in sight kind of desert. And it's a really long story, but the short version is this. It took 6 hours for a pickup truck to finally show up. It was the middle of the night, and all of a sudden I found myself at about 1 in the morning, sitting in this RV, being towed through the back roads of Utah, just thinking, how could this day have gotten any worse? You know, life has a way of throwing us curveballs like that all the time. But what about when it's not funny? And what about when it's not just for a day? What about when it feels like weeks and maybe even months, and maybe there's no end in sight for these bad days? What do we do then? Guys, life has really high highs and really low lows. And right now, I want to have an intentional and honest conversation about when life is down. I want to have an intentional and honest conversation about suicide and depression. Now, I want to just acknowledge right off the bat, this is a super, super heavy topic. For some people, you might feel kind of slightly removed from it, like it's a kind of out there issue. But for others, this hits right close to home. But guys, we need to talk about it. Did you know 1 in 5 students will battle depression before they become an adult? And suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for 10 to 24-year-olds. That statistic absolutely breaks my heart because so many lives are being cut short by something that is so incredibly preventable. And guys, we need to talk about it because no one is exempt or no one is safe from it. Depression affects the star athlete, the girl in art class, the kid who shows up to youth group every single week. Depression is not picky about its target. Right now, really quick, let me just make an important distinction because there's depression and there's sadness, and there's a difference between the two. Sadness is a feeling all of us have, obviously, at times when things don't quite go our way. And usually if we can find someone to talk to and who will just listen to us, it starts to feel better pretty quickly. Depression, on the other hand, while someone who's depressed may feel sad, it goes beyond sadness and turns into hopelessness. And talking to someone doesn't always help it go away. And it's not just moments of the day, it seems to discolor the whole entire day for days and even weeks at a time. Guys, that's an important distinction to make because if you're feeling sad, probably what you need is someone you trust to talk to and who will listen to you, and things will get a lot better. But if you're feeling depressed, I want you to seek more intentional help for that. Guys, depression is different for everybody. It looks different depending on the person, which makes it so hard to talk about. But guys, we need to be okay with talking about even the most difficult things. Now, here's something you might not know. The Bible talks about even the most difficult topics in life. So what I want to do right now is go to a story in the Bible that talks about the 2 things that we're addressing right now, depression and suicide. We're going to be in the book of John, chapter 20, but before we go there, I do just want to make one really important disclaimer. I know that some of you are taking medication right now for something like depression, anxiety, or bipolar, or maybe something else. And maybe you're seeing a therapist or you're seeing a counselor. Please hear me on this. That is okay and even a good thing. If you're taking medication, keep taking it. If you're seeing a counselor, keep seeing them. There's no stigma there. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But what I want to do right now is address the spiritual sickness, something we all face. Because if we see that counselor or take that medication and that's it, we're missing out on a huge part of the healing that is available to us. So we're in the book of John, chapter 20, and here's a little background to the story we're about to hop into. You see, Jesus had these 12 disciples, these 12 men who were all in, committed to following him wherever he goes. And they've been following him for 3 years now. But everything is about to change. They're about to experience one of those bad days, but this is more than that. Like, this is probably the worst day of their life. See, there's one evening where they're all having dinner together, Jesus and his disciples. It's actually gonna be the last dinner that they share together. And one of the disciples, Judas, he stands up and he leaves the table because he had made this deal with some people who wanted to see Jesus dead. He decided that for the right price, he'd be the one to give Jesus up. And sure enough, that evening, Jesus is arrested and he is tortured and he is killed and crucified. And the disciples have no idea what's going on. They're confused, and so they scatter everywhere. And what you might not know is that Judas immediately regretted his decision. When he saw what happened, this overwhelming sense of shame and guilt came over him. And he didn't see a way out. He didn't see a solution. He had no hope. And so he decided the best thing for him to do would be to end his life. And so he went and he hung himself. And over the next few days, the disciples are panicked and they're scared. They have no idea what to do. And it's in that moment that we pick up in John chapter 20. It starts in verse 19 and describes what's going on with the disciples right now. And it says this: "That evening, on the first day of the week, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. 'Peace be with you,' he said." So the disciples are terrified. They saw what happened to Jesus and they thought, man, if that could happen to Jesus, what are they going to do to people who follow him? So they're hiding for their lives. They're not out healing people. They're not out talking about Jesus or proclaiming the gospel. That was not their mission anymore. Their mission was just survival. But then Jesus enters into that situation. Jesus comes in and he gives them hope. And it goes on, and Jesus says this: "As he spoke, he held out his hands for them to see and showed them his side. They were filled with joy when they saw their Lord. He spoke to them again and said, 'Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you.' Then he breathed on them and he said to them, 'Receive the Holy Spirit.'" Jesus showed up in their situation. Jesus showed up in the darkness. He said, "This is not the end of the story. My death was not the end. No, my resurrection is the end of this story." And then he gave them a mission. He gave them a purpose. He said, "I didn't die on that cross for you to sit in your hopelessness. No, I'm giving you a mission and purpose, and I'm giving you the Holy Spirit to help you." So often, guys, we give up when it's dark and we don't wait for the redemption of the story. We give up when it's difficult without waiting to see how God is going to work through it. For 3 days, the disciples waited there. They had no hope. They didn't understand. They didn't know that redemption was coming. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you feel like the disciples. Maybe you feel like you're in a time where you are just waiting and you don't see the possibility of redemption. But guys, what would happen if you didn't wait? What would happen if you didn't wait to see God restore your situation? My mind immediately goes to Judas. He didn't wait. He gave up. He didn't see hope. And because of that, he didn't get a chance to see God redeem his story, because God did. God said that Judas's failure was not final. God wanted to use this huge mistake he made of betraying Jesus in order to further his kingdom. Because I know it sounds kind of funny, but guys, without Judas's betrayal, without the crucifixion, there is no resurrection. God wanted to use Judas's mistake in a big way. It was not the end of his story, but Judas didn't wait. What if Judas had waited? What if he sat there for those 3 days and waited in his pain and in his hopelessness? How would that have changed his story? Guys, the thing about depression and suicide is that when someone is right in the middle of it, it feels like suicide is the only option. It feels like it's the only way to relieve the pain. But hear me on this, guys. Suicide does not relieve pain, it multiplies it. Hear me again on that. Suicide doesn't relieve pain, it multiplies pain. When someone chooses to end their own life, there is a ripple effect of pain throughout their family, their friends, their school, their team, their whole entire community. If you want to relieve the pain, don't give up, dig in. Don't give up on your story, don't give up on your potential. Don't give up on God's plan for your life. Instead, dig into His promises. Dig in to the truth that God has a plan for your life, and dig into hope. But what does that look like in real day-to-day life? Well, it's a two-step process. The first step is being completely open, honest, and real about what's going on inside. Don't sugarcoat it, don't dress it up all pretty. Be real about what you're feeling. And take that feeling and connect it to a resurrection statement of redemption. Now, what does that look like? Well, there's a few different ways it could look. Maybe it's, this is the lowest I've ever felt in my entire life. But I know that with God, I can get through even the lowest times. Or maybe it's something bad just happened to me, and honestly, I just have no idea how I'm going to get through it or what's on the other side. But I know that God can take any situation and turn it for good. Or maybe it's, I don't even know if I want to keep living. But I know that with God, He gives me mercies that are new every single morning. So if I can just make it to tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next, He will continually give me grace and give me mercy. Guys, these aren't just feel-good statements. These are real and raw feeling statements connected to a resurrection statement of redemption. As it's acknowledging that our feelings aren't the end all, but that God's truth is steady even when our feelings are going back and forth. Guys, God is writing an amazing story for your life, but too often we give up when it's difficult before we actually see the redemption, just like the disciples gave up hope before they saw the resurrection. But what if we stayed strong when it was difficult, knowing that we have hope and that resurrection is coming? Some of you have been through really, really difficult chapters of life. Maybe you're in one right now, but you've got to hear this. That just because you have a bad chapter does not mean that you have a bad book. Again, just because you have a bad chapter does not mean you have a bad book. Better things are still to come. God is writing an amazing story for you. And what would happen if we gave up before we saw that redemption? What would happen if we didn't connect those feeling statements to those resurrection statements of redemption? I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who were at their absolute lowest moment in life, but they held on. They held on so they got to see the redemption. They held on so they saw God redeem their story. And that's their story, but it can be your story too. Because before it was their story, before it's your story, that's Jesus' story. When Jesus died, for 3 days, death thought it had won. Satan thought he had the victory. But then Jesus rose up from that grave, claimed new life, and claimed victory over death. And you know what that means? That means you're allowed to hope. That means no matter what situation you're going through, you are allowed to choose hope, because we know the truth that God can redeem all situations. Guys, what if we band together and we chose to really believe that God is bigger than our feelings? What if we went out to the people that we love and we asked them how they're really doing, and we engaged in those tough conversations? We have the opportunity to bring hope to our schools, to our families, and to our world. Guys, there are some dark places out there, but God can break through that darkness. How would your life look different if you really believed that? Don't give up. Dig in.
Hey guys, if you like the video, move the cursor that you see on your screen to the like button and click. While you're at it, take that same cursor to the subscribe button, also click. Seriously, you're not going to want to miss out on what's coming up.